Hey, gang. I have just last week attended the Rich Litvin Intensive, which was a 9-day coaching experience with 300 other coaches, which was a lot of fun, a lot of intensity, a lot of deep work, a lot of great connections. And I had the honor and the privilege of being in a small group with Mr. Mike Harris, who some of you may remember from the Adventure Effect Live podcast, who is rapidly becoming one of my favorite humans on the planet. Over the course of the intensive, one of the exercises that we did, one of the conversations, the themes that kind of ran through the event was that for me, what I'm looking for, what I'm yearning for is a sense of home and stability. And when that came up, Mike sent me a message saying, let's record a conversation about finding home in yourself and what that means. We're both very adventurous people. Mike was just telling me about how he's shortly about to go off on a 3-day hike with one of his clients along the Appalachian Trail. And neither of us have any idea what this conversation is going to be. And we're both very excited about it. Mike, hi.
Tom, hi. Thank you for the kind introduction.
Well, every word of it is true.
So where should we start here? I mean, I suppose at the beginning, but
the beginning is often a good place to start.
Yeah. So when did this start to come up for you at the intensive? Was it during the exercise that we did with Wendy?
Yes. So the exercise was basically to write down what you yearn for. It was introduced along the lines of yearning is a superpower. And what I take away from it is when we really connect to that thing that we yearn for, we start to create it. We start to, manifest it in our vortex, ready for it to kind of show up in this material world. And yeah, I mean, this exercise literally tore me apart, just ripped me open and scattered me around the room, which is interesting because it's not the first time that I've thought about wanting these things. It's not the first time I've told this story of not having stability in my life. But for some reason, I was just bawling my eyes out just as I wrote down this stuff. And yeah, I guess it's something that's really present for me right now is this yearning for roots of some kind. And what's interesting about that for me is that I've spent my whole life traveling around different countries, different adventures, different sports, different friend groups, different hobbies, kind of constantly moving from one to the next. And where I landed in this exercise was that I need a base from which to adventure from. Because without that stability, it's not an adventure, it's a fight for survival. So that's what's present for me. And I wrote about this in my Facebook post, which was, I guess, part of the reason that you reached out to have this conversation.
Yeah, because I think I'd first seen you post that in the event app. And I was struck by that because of how much it reflects my own experience.
Mm-hmm. So,
and
well, no, you finish and then I'll ask.
And I think I was going to answer what you were about to ask. I'd been reflecting on it a little bit. I'd gotten to it before the intensive started, where I was doing a reflection. I went into the Pine Barrens of New Jersey for a couple of days to meditate on this idea I'd had that my capacity to withstand pain or suffering or difficulty was more a barrier for me than it was an asset. And what I came away with was similar to you, that I'd always had this longing for the feeling of home, even though my upbringing was the opposite of yours.
Mm.
In that I always had a roof over my head. Growing up, my folks moved once when I was 11, and it was pretty seamless. We left one house, we showed up at the other, and we had a home.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had a house. And what I realized was that I'd never had the feeling of home, that home meant something different to me than simply a place, four walls, a roof, and whatever safety or security that symbolizes. And that was one of the great pains that I'd had the ability to withstand, that I hadn't created that. I spent so long withstanding it that I was out of the act of creating.
So what does it mean for you to have had a house but not a home? Like what's that distinction for you?
Well, for me, having a home means more than anything acceptance as I am. And my life never really fit into the neat little box that, the people closest to me thought it should. They didn't see the world in a normal way. I mean, that's how people like you and I end up here, is that we don't see the world the way most other people do. So it felt constrictive, right? Like I always had this feeling that the four walls of this house cannot contain me as I am. And yet I had to mold myself to fit that. So a home for me is a place that I don't have to mold myself to fit.
A place where you can be all of you.
Where I can be all of me, whatever that happens to be in the moment. And in reflection, what I created early on repeatedly was what you just described, sort of a home base from which I could go out and adventure in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And even that felt a little lacking. It felt like there was something missing. It was better. It was more home than I'd experienced. The first place I got that felt like that, I think I was 22 or 23, and had a nice little 1-bedroom apartment that had none of the markings of a home. It had the couch, which I liked to sleep on, and a kitchen table. The walls were bare. I think the countertops were pretty bare. There was nothing. If you walked into that apartment, you would have never known that it was me living there, let alone that anyone lived there. It looked like a staged apartment for someone to come in and get an idea of what apartments in the complex looked like. Not that
like a show home.
Right. But it was also reflective of how much time and energy I spent there.
Mm-hmm. So why didn't you spend time there?
Well, because I was busy adventuring. And well, at that time, what adventuring looked like for me was I was a top level pool player, and so I was traveling on the road a lot, just finding somewhere, some way, somehow to make some money. And I say I tried not to get into trouble, but the truth is that I was always looking to get into a little trouble.
The truth is you tried very hard to get into trouble.
I didn't have to look very hard for trouble to find me, my friend.
Yeah. So what's really present for me right now in both, like both my story and your story, is the distinction between running away from and running towards. And when we talk about finding home within ourselves, it's like, this is something that I've been playing with in my head for a while. Like, adventure has taught me so much about who I am and how I show up in the world, and what I'm capable of, and resilience, and all of this stuff that I talk about all the time. And when I'm out in nature or in some kind of trouble that I've put myself in deliberately, I don't need to think about all of the things that I don't have. And so the question that's been on my mind is, am I running towards or am I running away? Am I solving things by disappearing off into the mountains or to a different country or to whatever? Am I learning more about myself, or am I just bundling everything down and assuming that it'll be better over there? And do you get what I mean? Like, I've been having that kind of back and forth, you know, those two little voices on my shoulder, for a while.
Yeah.
And I think they're both at play, right? And it's a matter of presence and intention to some degree.
Yeah, and at a deeper level, it like, for me, my experience is that it is what I like to call a both neither,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes it is both, sometimes it is neither.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and just as you say that, and we are such expert meaning making machines, right? And we make so much significance out of everything. And the practice is to just not
Right.
just be, right? Because what do I actually need to do to find home inside myself? Nothing. Fuck all. Nothing. It's there if I just allow it to be.
Yes.
And what meaning do I need to make out of whatever I do out in the world? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I just get to have that experience. And yet, the however many percent of me that is human can't help it. Can't help but looking under all of the rocks and being like, oh, why is this here? What's going on? What does it mean?
Well, I mean, sure, because meaning gives you the hormones that make you feel good,
Hmm.
or the hormones that make you feel bad so that you can feel good.
Hmm.
And so it's natural that we want to dive deeper into this masterful meaning making. And the truth lies in that the meaning is both true and false, depending on our perception in the moment. But when we talk about finding home, it's simply a practice, like you said, of allowing yourself to be, being present with that, and not judging it. All of us have extraordinary range of being at our disposal. We don't use some of it because we think that we're not supposed to, that we could get in trouble for it. We don't use some of it because we judge ourselves for that. We judge our anger or our rage or our sadness or our cynicism.
I was, I think it was in the podcast on Friday. um, we were talking about fear, and I don't know if you know Marta Tchaikovsky.
I do not believe we've met before, although I did see your session with her.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So she's just a total badass, and climbs super hard. She's completely dedicated to climbing. She's a coach. She like lives in her van, and like before we started the podcast, I asked her where do you winter? Well, and she said, "Oh, I live at 65 degrees Fahrenheit." That's beautiful. But anyway, during that conversation, I said something which was, I think, pretty genius and profound, which was that your capacity to be with fear determines the range of experiences within which you can hold on to your beingness. And fear you can replace with anger, sadness, excitement, joy, whatever emotion word you want, right? And and this is a real key part of adventure for me. Adventure is training in being with that fear, being with that discomfort, being with that whatever it is. And that I was thinking about this because I was thinking about awe. I have this book on my shelf that's just entitled Awe, which I really want to read. But awe is such a powerful experience. It makes us so humble. It makes us more empathetic. It makes us basically better humans. And that, so where I'm going with this is that the amount of my beingness that I can hold on to, that's my home in here. It's the range of situations where I can show up and I don't need to be, I can be all of me, like you said, right? That's home. I can show up and I don't need to hide in anything. And one of the things that I always used to say, I haven't said it for a while, like home for me is when my shoulders do that. And for years, that place was the Llanberis Pass in Wales, which is where I learned to climb, where I learned to mountain bike, whitewater kayak. And I would arrive there and just feel that sense of, I'm here, nothing else matters. Which I imagine is what most people feel when they get home into their house. So that was a bit of a wandering ramble.
Well, it's funny that the idea that most people feel that when they walk into their house. I would bet that is not true.
I was just thinking that
that their shoulders drop. I mean, most people have to feel like they have to go somewhere for their shoulders to drop, right? They feel like they have to go to some island resort or off to some mountain or into a forest.
Which then brings up the question, are we searching for something that no one has? Are we searching for something that doesn't exist?
Well, it does, but it comes back to the practice of allowing it to exist, right? You know, whether it's your spot or my spot or someone else's magical spot where they first discovered this. The question is can you allow that to be present in a place that's completely ordinary, a place that doesn't represent that sense of initial awe, right? Can you allow for that? Can you allow for a muted awe of the ordinary,
What,
and a muted awe of the multitudes that exist within you as a part of the ordinary? We're all made of the same shit, you know, like we're basically bags of bones wrapped up in meat suits, and we force air molecules through said meat suits in order to make sounds, which is what we're doing right here in order to convey a message that we've conceptualized and sort of fabricated, that if you tried to put it in a wheelbarrow, you could not. And yet here we are. Here we are. I mean, if that's not something to be in awe of, that we have evolved from single-celled organisms to these meat suits, then what is there to be in awe of?
Yeah. And so what's present for me right now is the idea of expectation, which came up. Curtis has been doing a lot of work on expectations, and we had a big discussion about the difference between beliefs, expectations, and oh god, can't remember the third one. Something else that's kind of in a similar ballpark. And one of the things that I want to bring more into my life is more fun and silliness.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a session around that, and I just made a decision to expect more fun and silliness. And it was literally a 90-degree turn. And now I find myself being fun and silly almost everywhere I go. And I'm like, have I changed, or have I just tuned the radio to a different station? Like, is my behavior different? Or am I just, have I just changed my expectation to allow that piece in? And is it as simple as just tuning the dial to allow home in?
Right. Do you, like, where are you pointing your attention in this moment? When it's really easy to sit in our living room and see the view. We look through old pictures on our phone. We see the view from the top of a mountain. And it's really easy to say in that moment, I look at this view and I am not that. And yet here we are, the person who at one time was one with that. And it's not because we weren't always one with that awesome view, with that awesome being. We're all from the same ecosystem. We are all of this earth. And we tell this story, though. We look at that which we are and we say, I am not that. Yes. And yet that can be generated in any moment, not by forcing it. I always say that you can't think your way out of a problem that you thought yourself into. But you can point your attention at what is awesome in anything. Because everything has had a long, long journey to get to here.
A lot longer than you were thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of discovering home is, there are a couple things there. Well, you know what? I'm just going to make it really simple. It's one thing. And it is letting yourself, like pointing your attention in such a way that you can see everything that you think you are and see that you're not that. The identity you've made up, all the judgments you have about yourself, all that stuff, all these concepts and all that other nonsense. We can rule, like you can point your attention in a way that you rule that stuff out. Right? You would say, I'm an adventurer, but you did not come out of the womb in a pair of crampons.
You don't know that.
I would bet that birth would have made headlines had that been the case. but that's the thing, is that we are, we didn't start as that. So we have been something other than that which we choose to identify as. I would have told you at one point in my life I was a banker. I am a banker. Well, what was I after that? Because at some point I ceased to be a banker. And if my identity is that fluid, that can be a lot of things. That can be a barrier, or that can be an asset.
Yeah. Which brings us to the idea of what is true. What is truth?
Right.
Because essentially nothing is true.
Well, you is truth.
Yes, but anything that I speak out into the world,
mm-hmm.
Can you say categorically, this is true, this is not true? I am a banker. Is that true? Or is it not true? Is it true forever? Is it true now? Has it ever been true? And when we loosen our grip on what is truth, what is real, and we just kind of accept, again, it comes back to allowing. It's like the less boxes we can put ourselves in, the freer we are. Which then brings me to, I kind of just in this moment remembered the initial impetus for this conversation was to talk about, do we relate to nature the way we do because we're searching for a home inside ourselves? And one of the things that I love and talk about all the time about being in nature, being on an adventure, is there is no banker, there is no husband, there is no child, there is no whatever other label or layer we've attached to ourselves, because it doesn't matter. The mountain doesn't care if you're a banker. The river couldn't give a shit if you're married or a lesbian or whatever. You're just there having an experience. And the more extreme the adventure, the more of those layers you can shed. When you're on a slack line 200 feet above the valley floor, or you're skydiving, or you're climbing a rock face or whatever, the only thing that exists for you is this handhold here. That's it. And the second you bring all of those layers back in and you start thinking about anything other than this handhold or that, when you're slacklining, you're focused on like one minute piece of tree bark 100 meters away or a kilometer away, depending on how good you are at slacklining. I'm not that good. But as soon as we allow those layers back in, we're off. And so, and that's meditation for me, is single focus, right? A single point of focus. And I mean, well, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it flow, you can call it meditation, you can call it, it's all wrapped up in this same experience. And where am I going with this? Where I'm going with this is the more time we can spend without those layers, the more we realize who we actually are and what we're actually up to.
I wrote last week in something of a different vein from this. I wrote that nature always loves you and never lies. Right? Nature never tells you a story that is untrue, which is better than what we can say for ourselves. We get into the act of storytelling, and naturally there's some falsehood built into it. And like you pointed to, one of the things that happens in an adventure while we are out in nature is that our world becomes really, really small. Right? We live practically breath to breath. Right? I learned that. I learned living breath to breath in the sweat lodge, not as a meditation, but if you've ever been in that kind of heat where it violently burns to take in air, you're living breath to breath, because that one breath is the only thing in your world right now.
Literally this Friday, there are a bunch of saunas out in the woods that, God bless them, who built them, I have no idea, but they're there. And I was in one on Friday, and I remember my ears, the tips of my ears were burning. I was like, this is a new experience. And it's and it was too much. I had to like cover up, but yeah, in that moment, the only way you can actually breathe is like you're breathing through a straw, like.
Yeah.
And the interesting paradox there is when we go on these adventurous experiences, our world becomes very small, like when you're climbing, like when you're in a sweat lodge, whatever. But when we go on an adventure inwards into meditation, our world becomes infinitely large.
Yes.
So we have to go in to find the big place, and we have to go out to find the small place.
That's a beautiful paradox.
Mm-hmm. It's a new thought in this moment, generated by you, Mr. Mike Harris.
I can't take credit for that because it came out of you. So.
Generated by the space that exists between us.
Yes, the space between where magic happens indeed. The that living, and it's funny the way you said that, because the way we live is to seek larger outward and seek to define ourselves narrowly inward.
Yeah, I am banker.
Yeah. I am banker. I am coach. I am whatever. Mm-hmm. And yet we we go into the woods, into the mountains, and they just fall off. We think that is playing a role. We think that that is our great act, but really our great act is what we do when we come back.
Yeah. But that's the same with yoga and meditation, right? How many people go and they do their weekly yoga class and they think, great, I am a spiritual being, but all of that yoga stays on the mat.
Mm.
Right? All of that meditation stays on the cushion in their bedroom. The work is to bring that sense of spaciousness, that bigness, that possibility, that whatever it is that you get from it into this conversation and the next conversation and this angry email and this trip to the vet.
Right. Right. All that stuff that we do out there on the yoga mat or out on our adventures, it slows us down to the speed of presence. Slows us down to the speed of pure awareness.
And the trick is not to get off the mat and just back up to
right
full speed.
Right. The practice, it's a dual practice, really, right? There's the practice of allowing, which is allowing that which is out there to be that which is out there. And then the allowing of our own presence, our own awareness, right? That practice, bringing that into the mundane moment, the angry email, the conversation with your partner, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah. The amount that we speed up tends to correlate directly with the amount that we're resisting what is.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with a friend the other day. I think there was a rumor of more lockdown here because of COVID, and her response was, "This is so." I can't remember the exact adverb she used, but she basically said, "This is so human of us. We're just resisting what is so hard." And then obviously, like, COVID is a big thing, but it is indicative of everything that we do as humans. It's like we want things to be different to how they are, and so we better do a bunch of stuff to change everything. Change myself, change you, change my house, change my job, change the world, change, because everything is somehow bad. Everything is somehow not good enough.
Right. Right. Whatever is happening, we can put it, we can create it in the world of right and wrong.
Yeah, I don't like the way that you said that thing. You need to change. You've hurt my feelings. And I mean, it's very easy to talk about this in a lofty manner because I do all of those things. But the practice, the work of coming home, to bring it back to what we're talking about, is to stop resisting what is.
Yeah. And that's an uncomfortable practice.
Yeah.
That is a deeply uncomfortable practice. And yet in 2021, we don't have the luxury of the comfort that comes along with avoiding it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because for all the trappings we have of a wonderful life, right? Roofs over our heads and wealth beyond the imagination of our ancestors a few generations ago.
Mm-hmm.
We are in greater struggle, in greater conflict, and not just with one another, but with ourselves.
Yeah. Well, that's why 1 in 4 people are depressed. That's why, anxiety is such a huge issue. That's why all of these, mental disorders are so prevalent, is because we're wound up so tight as a society. There's so much pressure, and you have kids who are 6 years old who have eating disorders,
Yeah.
and anxiety attacks, and
even in a more, I don't want to call it more benign, but even in a less outwardly obvious way, to like from a moment to moment perspective, the person who, you know what, I had a crappy day at work today. I'm just going to unwind and look at Twitter. And that person goes and starts picking fights on Twitter, starts picking fights on social media, those little tension releases.
Yeah. Or they go to the pub and they drink 10 pints of Stella and start having fights with real people, with real consequences.
With real people. Yeah. And so both of them are very consequential.
Yeah.
Right. The picking a fight after 10 Stellas obviously is a little more obvious on its face, but they both have the same ripple effect. Right. They both have that they both create more of the same of that from which they came.
Yeah.
Right. They both self-perpetuate.
Are you familiar with have you read Reality Transurfing?
I have not, no.
I think you would very much enjoy it.
I actually do own a Kindle copy of it. I bought it about a month ago. I just haven't gotten into it yet.
Giant tome. So that book introduced me to the concept of what he calls pendulums. And a pendulum is an energetic structure. So this conversation between you and me is a pendulum. Vancouver is a pendulum, right? And everybody that lives in Vancouver puts energy into the pendulum. The pendulum is not me and it's not you. It's the conversation or the space that exists between us. Apple, the government, they're all different pendulums. And the pendulum exists, he says, to feed itself with your energy and my energy. And the pendulum doesn't ever care about the well-being of the individual. It cares about itself and drawing people in, right? And our hope with this conversation, the pendulum's hope with this conversation, is that people are going to watch it and they're going to enjoy it and they're going to get something from it and they're going to share it and it's going to become a global sensation and we're going to become millionaires. I'm extrapolating into the silly, but that's what the pendulum would love for this. And when you think about a government or COVID or something huge it's a pendulum that has a lot of energy, or the Nazi party or something like that. Like the bigger the pendulum gets, the bigger the consequences are for resisting that pendulum. But then he goes on to talk. So you were talking about the troll on Twitter creates more of that which he came from. So what he talks about when he's talking about pendulums is that I can be over here handing out leaflets for the government and like saying you have to vote for XYZ party, and I'm giving energy to the pendulum. But I can also be over here protesting in the streets and saying the government are a bunch of assholes and they're fucking the planet and blah, blah, blah. I'm still contributing energy to the same pendulum, but I'm pushing it from the other side. And so the only way to defeat the pendulum is to remove your energy from it, just disengage altogether from it. And then it has no power over you. and it can't suck your energy, and you can put your energy in the direction that you want. You know, like you said before, you can point your consciousness in the direction that you want. And this like simple little piece has been pretty profound for me. And I realized that I've been doing it a lot through my life anyway. Like last year, when I deleted the news app off my phone, my life got about 1700% better overnight, because I realized I'm not going to do anything about all of this misery that I'm reading about. So why am I making myself miserable? What I am going to do is the things that I know how to do, that I have power over, that are going to ripple down and make a difference. Right? I'm going to work with inspiring people who are solving world problems. I'm going to work with people who have the tools and the drive to deal with poverty or ocean cleanup or climate change or whatever it is, that's their gift. And my gift is to help them explode their gift. And so I don't need to know what's going on, because that just gets in the way of me showing up fully in my own beingness.
Right. Right. And to your point, there are so many little pendulums in our lives that, for lack of a better way of saying it, they can either create residue or they can remove it. And so take the interactions you have with your partner on a day-to-day basis. And this, by the way, is really foundational for me in this too. This is a foundational way of putting it into practice, where if you have a partner, you have a roommate, whoever you live with, whether you live with your folks, your siblings, a partner, roommate, whatever, you're going to have a lot of interactions with them. And a relationship is itself a pendulum, right? And the thing is you can also put an energy into it without moving it, without pushing the pendulum. It can just be a neutral energy. It can be a blank slate. And that's not to say that there is nothing behind it, that it's listless, but rather that it doesn't seek to move the energy to one side or the other. Like my wife and I were separated for almost 2 years. And my coach at the time, he pointed out to me that I may have made some messes in my life that I needed to clean up. And that's why I was complaining of feeling creatively stuck. And he said, who do you need to clean up messes with? And I named a bunch of people, and Kristen was not one of them. I was dug in on that. I was of the opinion that I do not owe her a cleanup for anything. She owes me, and really dug in on it. And then later that day, I was like, damn it, I had to clean this up. I got to own my part. And it was a transformative thing for our relationship, and with as far as the energy of the relationship went. I mean, it had been really contentious between us for probably about 8 months at that point. We'd gone through long periods where we didn't speak, and we lived under the same roof all the while. So it was very energetically draining. And I showed up to take ownership of my role in everything that had happened with us over the years, my own shortcomings, and I wanted to share what I wanted, who I wanted to be in this relationship, whatever it looked like going forward, without expecting anything back for it. The neutrality of just offering. And we had this really beautiful conversation that came out of it. We didn't get back together that day. It was still months and months later, but we that laid the groundwork for us to be in relationship without all that extra charge, without all that residue. It removed like 30 minutes of honesty, removed 10 years of residue.
Yeah. One day I'm going to write a book that's going to be called It's Never About the Toilet Seat. Which is,
says the man who always leaves it up.
well, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. Usually I'm pretty good. But that is what you just talked about. It's so much residue that we build up, or another word is distortion.
Mm-hmm.
That we end up in a place where I'm not interacting with Mike Harris. My distortion is interacting with your distortion, and like where you were, and I don't owe her anything. She owes me.
Right.
Right? That's your mess in your head.
Absolutely.
Right. And she's got her own mess in her head. Right. And we all have, in every relationship that exists, there is distortion, which is a result of all of my experiences and traumas and whatever beliefs. And when I speak to that distortion, when I say this is what's going on for me, this is how I want to be, as you said, that 30 minutes of brutal honesty can just kind of sweep everything. Not sweep everything, but it can clear out a lot of muck. And so the reason for the title of that book, whenever it comes through, is, it is often the toilet seat that causes the end of a relationship. Right? A 10-year marriage, the toilet seat's up, the fight, and then it's over.
Everything comes to a head.
And both people are like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
Over here, why did I get so angry about a toilet seat? And over here, have I just been kicked out of my house because of a toilet seat? But it's the lack of awareness that it's years and years and years of never addressing the, hesitant to use the word truth, having poo-pooed it so hardly earlier in the conversation, but never addressing the little things, the small tweaks that you can make along the way by just being honest and vulnerable.
Yeah.
So when you say that thing, that thing that you always say in that tone of voice, every single time it makes me feel like a piece of shit. Can you try and not do that? It would really, I'd love that so much. Mm-hmm. Then you never get to the toilet seat moment.
Right. I don't even go so far as making a request like that. Mm. I am like a good example of how it usually goes in my world is a few weeks ago, Kristen and I were having a conversation, and I don't remember what happened, but it started to get tense, and I was starting to feel like she was getting pretty angry at me, and my old response would have been to get defensive about it. Get defensive, make her wrong for being angry, maybe be angry in response, judge her, all those things. You always do this. And the moment her voice rose to the point where it was pretty clear that she was angry, I said, hey, look, I love you and I don't want to argue with you. Can we just take a few minutes and sort this out when we both feel a little better? And she said, all right, fine. And we just stepped away from each other for a couple minutes. And we came back and she said, I'm sorry. I got angry. And I said, I'm sorry. I think I might have pushed your buttons there a little bit. And that was like, she never had to point out to me that I was pushing her buttons. I knew I was doing it. She never has to point out to me when my tone of voice is snarky. I know I do that. If she'd pointed it out to me, I might have been like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, whoa, what color is the pot kettle? Right? Like,
Yeah.
it's an opportunity for both of us to have a reflection, even if that means for me that it could turn out one-sided.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly okay with it turning out one-sided because I don't want anything back for it.
Yeah, I guess where I was, when I mentioned whatever that example was, like that
Right.
conversation could have become a bigger and deeper conversation of this is why I got triggered in that moment, because
Right. Oh yeah.
when I was a kid, my dad always said this, and so when you say that, I don't see you, I see my dad saying that thing, or whatever it is, and that's why it's important to me.
I understand now the sort of like the retrospective of it. Yes.
So that piece that you said comes first.
Right.
Like, yeah, there's something happening here. Let's just take a breather, come back to it, and then it's kind of the post game analysis.
Yes.
Which is really important for, because I know when I'm pushing your buttons, but I don't necessarily know why. Right? I don't necessarily know why it's a button for you and why it's so big, and I'm just like mashing it as I can. And when we can have that kind of conversation,
yes,
Amen. That's when we can grow, and that's when we can really clear the distortion out of the way. Because if we stop at I'm sorry, then there's no growth.
Right.
I'm sorry to, oh, I love you, make up sex, and and the actual issue is never addressed. Whereas if you have the courage to go that one step deeper, and then everyone understands the why,
right,
of how this seemingly small situation exploded into a big thing. And just as I'm saying this, I'm thinking it's getting to a point where I can have these conversations quite easily with other people. And to bring us back to the subject of what we're talking about, it's about having those conversations with yourself. Because I don't know about you, but I press my own.
You better believe.
More than anyone else presses my buttons. And very rarely do I sit down with myself and say, okay, let's take a breather. Let's come back to this in a few minutes when we're both feeling better. What's going on there?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we definitely do not say that to ourselves.
Hey, Tom, but I feel like I was pressing your buttons there. What was going on? Well, Tom, you see, when you say this stuff to yourself,
and the example you just pointed to of having that conversation, after having that deeper conversation, what that's really pointing to is creating in ourselves an easier pathway to seeing the good in other people at all times. Which ultimately, I mean, if that's part of the practice of creating home, of coming home, because you see that which in others, which you see in yourself. Right? You can't give them that gift if you don't have that for yourself.
Yeah.
And
what you admire in others is what you admire in yourself, and what you judge in others is what you judge in yourself.
And so it goes for for home. If you were at home with yourself, then the place, you will find that everywhere you look.
There we are. That's the answer. Simple, right?
People who have watched this the whole way through are going to say, yeah, but couldn't you have just said that 45 minutes ago?
Maybe.
I mean, if we didn't like the sound of our own voices so much, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you. I really love the sound of my own voice until it's recorded.
Oh yeah, but it. Oh, my friend, being on the other end of it is very rich.
Oh well, likewise.
Thank you.
Likewise. So I was listening to a song yesterday, which was one of these like dance tracks with a motivational speech, you know, layered over, and the line that just made me crease myself. He was either he was talking to a camera or he was talking to a big audience or whatever, and he said, "The only thing you need to do to get to where you've never been before is change the way you think." And then a bunch of other stuff. And I was like, that's not one thing that you need to do.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a little bit of an oversimplification. I was thinking like, okay, I'll go in the drawer and get my screwdriver and I'll just,
change it
and change the old thinking module. Good to go. So and to think I've been living with this crappy one for all these years.
Yeah, all we need to do is go down to the Apple store and get an upgrade.
That's the bougie way to do it. If we're doing it, Tom. Really bougie of you.
Well, what can I say? So, I mean, maybe that's a great place to wind this up. All we need to do is change the way we think.
All we need to do is change the way we think. Yeah, it's perfect. And we're gonna have to bookmark that going where no one's ever gone before, because yeah, to be continued, my friend. That itself will be another rich conversation, I'm sure.
I don't think to date I've had a single conversation with you that has not been rich. And there are plenty of seeds in there for a rich one.
Indeed, my friend.
Well, I have had a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too.
Doing this, and I look forward to hearing what people have to say.
Yeah, me too. This is going to be I hope that they take something useful away from it.
Yeah. And for anybody who is watching, please do let us know. Put in a comment and let us know your perspective, your takeaway, your insight, whatever you got from it. Anything you can share with these two humble people who are just desperately seeking home inside themselves. Any and all comments gratefully received. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Mike, for being with me. More to come.
And thank you, Tom, for having me.